Hi, today we're going to talk about the differences between site-framed valley transitions and truss-framed valley transitions, also called valley sets. I'm excited to talk to you about this. My name is Chad Johnson. I'm with Truss Components. I've been in the truss industry for about 35 years. Let's go ahead and dive in. Let's start with what is a valley transition. So your typical garage or just a rectangle structure, it won't have one. So if our roof looking from above just looks something like this, real simple, that would be a gable style, or even if it's a hip style, but it's just a square or a rectangle, no valley transitions, nothing to worry about. But as soon as we get a little more complicated and we add part of the building that from above would make it look like a T or like an L, now we have to blend the roof together between those two portions of the building. So this section right here is what we would call a valley, and we need to transition the roof from one portion to another. If we didn't put a valley in there, what would happen is water would run down and it would just hit the back of this portion here and have nowhere to go. So we put in a valley transition. There are two ways to do that. One is to cut rafters on site. The other is to build trusses for it. So I'll show you how those two work and the benefits and downsides of each type. Here's what a cross-section of a field-framed valley transition would look like. We've removed that portion that would be coming out from the building that would cause the need for that transition so that we can look into it. So a typical field-framed valley transition is going to consist of a sole plate that is put down on the roof below, and then rafters. Those would typically be, if it's a field frame situation, they would be 2x6 or larger, depending on what the span is. And then there's going to be a ridge beam, and that ties the rafters together up at the top. So one of the advantages of field framing like this is you have a lot of flexibility. If you have a complex structure, or if you're matching up new framing to existing, and the existing framing, you may not be entirely sure of what the pitch is or heel heights, that sort of thing, then on-site framing is a good option. It is time-consuming to cut these parts accurately, and it requires a high level of skill in order to get everything to line up properly. But if done right, it is a good way to work with a complex structure. Now, some downsides are that you do have to have skilled labor in order to get it done. It's going to take a little longer to conventionally frame than it would to use a set of trusses. And what I've drawn here is the typical method in the field, but it is not the recommended method. So the recommended method from the truss manufacturers is that these be supported to the framing below at very regular intervals, and that way the load gets distributed over the roof below, the roof structure below, evenly. If we don't put in these supports at multiple locations, then what we end up doing is we point load where the members meet. So there's a point load where that ridge ties in, and then there is a line load, but that creates a point on each truss underneath. If you imagine that underneath the structure are trusses or rafters, so each point where that sole plate meets, it's going to put a load right on that. And the structure below generally isn't designed for those kind of point loads. So conventional in the field does not include these intermediate posts, and therefore technically it's overloading the framing below. So with a pre-manufactured roof truss valley overframe set, there are some great advantages. this would be a set of trusses that would come out, and they would match the shape of the structure in front of the valley, and then they would gradually taper down to go over the roof behind the valley. Now these would come out just like any other truss, as far as 2x4 or 2x6 top and bottom cord. They would have uprights every 4 feet, which makes for a sturdy structure of the truss itself, and then also distributes the load evenly over the roof framing below. As we were talking about, the roof framing below is designed for a uniform load, not for point loads typically. And then additionally, because these are pre-manufactured parts that come out already designed to fit where they go, you just put them in place, they go together very quickly, and so it requires less skill and less hours or man hours to install them on the site. So again, conventional framing, good for a complex roof situation, especially if you don't know what the pitches or heel heights, those sort of things are. Downside is it requires a lot of skill. It takes a little bit longer and typically isn't done per the recommendations of the truss manufacturer, so it loads the roof below incorrectly. Pros of the trussed valley set: very quick to install, it's engineered, it distributes the loads properly below. Downside might be that if you have an existing structure, or there's going to be a portion of the structure that you don't know what the pitches or heel heights are going to be on that, then it's more difficult to design the valley truss framing ahead of time. Hope this was a helpful video. Any truss manufacturer that you work with would be very happy to supply you with a set of valley overframe trusses and make your project go more smoothly. If you liked what you saw here, this video will tell you everything you need to know about roof trusses, and here's a video that will tell you about floor trusses versus joist framing for floors. Thanks, we'll see you on the next one.